Welcome. Christopher West from the Theology of the Body Institute and myself have recorded a 6-part series on John Paul II's excellent philosophical work, Love and Responsibility. We recorded them in my studio and Christopher's studio, and we're going back and forth on different channels. So this is the second in a 6-part series on Love and Responsibility. If you haven't yet watched the first episode, click the link in the description below and watch it over on Christopher's channel before watching this one. You should also know that you can watch all of them right now by becoming a local supporter at mattfradd.locals.com. Here we go. All right, welcome to our second episode of our study on love and responsibility. In the first episode, we talked about the person and the sexual urge. Today, in the second chapter,
person and love.
That's correct. And Carol Wojtyła talks about love under 3 different aspects. So let's begin there.
The metaphysical.
All right.
Now, what do we mean by that? I'll get to that in a moment. The psychological and the ethical. So metaphysical, what do we mean? A metaphysical analysis of love. Metaphysical is one of those words that's hard to kind of grab hold of. What does metaphysical mean? People use it sometimes in different senses. Wojtyła himself says metaphysical, the way he uses it, is beyond the biological, beyond the mere physical reality, right? Animals have sexual instincts, but they don't have this metaphysical reality beyond the physical that enables them to love. Only persons, person is the word we would use to distinguish us from the animals. We are animals, but we're not merely animals, right? It makes no sense whatsoever to speak of love and responsibility when you're talking about dogs mating, right? What's the difference between dogs mating and husband and wife becoming one flesh? We're getting into the reality that human beings are not merely bodies. We are body and soul. That's the beyond the physical, metaphysical reality of love, right? So let's look first. We'll look first at the metaphysical, then the psychological, and the ethical aspect of love. And we're going from chapter 1, the person and the sexual urge, right? How can the sexual urge become a desire to love divinely? That's what we're after here. Not just responding to an animal instinct like dogs mating, but responding as persons and learning how to love through the gift of sexuality. That's what we want to talk about here. So metaphysical analysis of love. We're going beyond the merely biological. And we talk here, JP2 talks about love as attraction. That's from this translation, which I typically prefer, but in this translation, we use the word fondness.
I love that.
Yeah, I like both. I love as attraction, love as fondness. Fondness maybe is a richer word, so we'll go back and forth. Can you read there, Matt, under the heading love as attraction or fondness?
Okay, because attraction is fickle, we must learn a proper culture of fondness in which my initial attraction to particular qualities of a person becomes an attraction to the person as such. Qualities are repeatable. The value of the person is unrepeatable.
This is one of those concepts, when I was first learning it, it just gave me a language to understand myself and my own experience of life. The human person is unrepeatable. Qualities of a person are repeatable. This is very, very important. Let me give you an example of what he's getting at here. I don't know why I'm wired this way. I've just always been attracted to red hair. I don't know why, but I find red hair very attractive. That's a quality, right? You can find thousands of women who have that quality, because qualities of a person are repeatable, meaning you can find many instances of them. If your love, what we call love, stops at a person's qualities, well, your love is going to shift and drift to wherever you find those qualities, and you can always find those qualities to a more attractive level in somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, my wife, Wendy, if she believed that my love only went as deep as the attractiveness of red hair, well, guess what? My wife is a brunette, and she's a graying brunette, right? And this is another thing about qualities, graying brunette, right? Qualities change over time. If a man, speaking from the male perspective, we're attracted only to certain, shall we say,
body type. Let's just
the figure, a certain figure, right? Firm, plump aspects of a certain type of figure. Well, guess what? Those plump aspects are going to sag with time, right? If your love only goes that deep, and I'm always putting love in quotes here because it's not authentic love at this level. If your love is only attracted to those certain qualities, what happens when your wife's qualities fade, change, sag?
Then
your love is going to drift somewhere else.
Or whatever that is that you held towards her, not even love. And I was about to say that there's a distinction here that maybe should be made between the surface and then these attributes as distinct from the person. Because in a way, the surface reveals the person.
Yes.
So it's not, the problem isn't that you love the surface.
Correct.
The problem is you're somehow separating it or seeing it independent of the...
Or you haven't made the pilgrimage from the exterior to the interior, right? The exterior, the physical qualities of a person are what we first encounter. And John Paul II says that's the sacrament of the person, the outer visible reality.
Let me ask you a personal question.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this to try to sound holy or whatever, but it's the fact that I find my wife more attractive today than I did when we were married.
Yes.
And I know that sounds like something that husbands should say, but I actually mean it. Like I'm sure her body is getting less attractive. That's objective. My body is getting less attractive. That's what happens as you age.
In a certain sense.
In a certain sense, it does, yeah. But I look at her and I just really... She said to me the other day, she's like, "Hey, I'm getting all blotchy." I'm like, "I love your blotches." And I kissed him. I love it.
That's the sign of exactly what JP2 is getting at here, what he would call an integral love, where your love has reached the person, the unrepeatable mystery of Cameron, right? And when, or to the degree that your love has reached that depth, now you have a foundation on which a relationship can last. If you stop merely at the externals, your love will fade as those externals fade, right? And you also, when Cameron knows that you love her, she's not threatened by other, even more physically attractive women.
Yeah.
If you find yourself, well, for example, the red hair thing with me. Suppose Wendy and I are out to dinner. An attractive redheaded waitress shows up. And I say, "Wendy, doesn't she have lovely red hair?" If my love only goes as deep as Wendy's qualities, Wendy will shrink because she doesn't have red hair. If my love has reached the unrepeatable mystery of Wendy, then I can say to Wendy, "Doesn't she have lovely red hair?" And Wendy's not going to shrink because Wendy knows that waitress is not her. And my love has found its home in the unrepeatable mystery of Wendy. Only when love reaches that level do we have a secure foundation for love.
And it's a much more dangerous place to go, that is to have communion of persons. It's almost like the difference between playing, let's say, an ice hockey game on a PlayStation and then actually playing ice hockey, right? Because in one sense, you could say, well, obviously playing a video game is much more enjoyable. And you're like, well, yeah, okay, I can see how you would say that, but it's not the real thing. And if you've encountered the real thing and you come to love the real thing, then you can see that the other thing is not where you want to stop or something like that.
Well said.
And it's a lot more dangerous. It's a dangerous place to be.
It's dangerous because it makes us very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because we have to, for our persons to be known, seen, and loved, we have to expose them. We have to open ourselves up. And this is the risk of love. Will you read quote number 1 for us, Matt? I think it summarizes very well what JP2's point here is.
And just to remind everybody, we've got the links to the PDF below so you can follow along with us. This is from Love and Responsibility. Karol Wojtyła says, "Beauty is very important in the attraction on which love between man and woman is based. We should, however, recall here that a human being is a person, and it is therefore necessary to discover and to be attracted by the inner as well as the outer beauty, and perhaps indeed to be more attracted to the former than by the latter."
Let's just pause there for a minute. To be more attracted to what we could call, remember our heading here, the metaphysical analysis of love. JP2 is getting at that aspect of the person that is metaphysical, meaning beyond the physical, right? We're talking about something spiritual, talking about something, an inner beauty of the person. It would be foolish to talk about the inner beauty of a squirrel, right? Because a squirrel is not a person, right? But we know what we're taught. We know there's a deeper dimension to the human being than merely the animal reality, the physical reality.
Like dogness is appropriate to describe dogs, but humanness doesn't feel appropriate because there's still the individual personhood.
Exactly.
And it can't be summed up by the category of human beings.
And at this analysis, the metaphysical analysis of love, we're talking about that inner mystery of the person. And notice, JP2 is so balanced and properly nuanced here. He's not saying skip the physical to get to the spiritual. He's rather saying allow the physical to be the sacrament of the spiritual. Don't throw the body away, because that's just another disintegration, right? On the one hand, in the culture today, you have this hyper focus on physical beauty to the neglect of spiritual beauty. But in many Christian circles, we just flip that ruptured pancake over and we say the only thing that matters is the spiritual, just disregard the body. Both are a rupture, right? Either way, you're dead. Why? Because what is death? The separation of the body and the soul. This vision is an integral vision of beauty. He's not saying disregard physical beauty. He's saying let physical beauty take you on this pilgrimage to the inner beauty of the person. So go ahead and conclude that section there.
Yeah, the attraction on which genuine love is based must originate not just in a reaction to visible and physical beauty, but also in a full and deep appreciation for the beauty of the person.
Yeah, so notice he says not just. He's not saying you shouldn't have an attraction to the physical. That's where we start, right? That's the first encounter of the person is the body.
This is good, right? Because you could imagine someone saying, as Christians, we are meant to carry our cross and to sacrifice, and therefore you need to marry the most grotesque and unappealing person and learn to love them. That would be wrong.
No. He says later how there has to be some level of sexual attraction, or you wouldn't marry the person, right? This is not a disintegrated view. It's not a flipping from physical to spiritual and disregarding the physical. Again, it's an integral view of body and soul, but that's a hard task because that integration has to happen in us. And let's just be honest, the disintegrated view, either on the physical side or the angelistic, merely spiritual side, that's a lot easier because we don't have to endure the death and resurrection within our own being.
Yeah.
The path to integration is the death and resurrection of Jesus as a lived experience in our own lives.
I'm thinking too that there are probably other surface ways that we love each other, not just to do with the physical, but even like meet my needs,
True.
Take care of my house, provide for me.
Yes.
And if my wife was only to see me as a provider and love me because of this kind of external aspect without loving me, then the same thing is true. Once that provision leaves, her love leaves.
Yes.
So how do we love people not just for their physical attributes, but for what they do for us emotionally, let's say, like any other woman could perhaps replicate?
Yes. And let's recall from episode 1 what JP2 calls the personalistic norm. And it's the idea that the person is the kind of being that should never be used merely as a means to an end, right? If your wife loves you only because you provide for her needs, well, what happens if you're in a car accident and can no longer provide for her needs in that way? Is she no longer going to love you?
Yeah.
If she doesn't, that means her love right from the start was usorial.
Right.
She was using you as a means to an end. The opposite of love, says the personalistic norm, is not so much hatred, but to use the other. Love is to honor the dignity of the person as such. And Matt, you have a value as a person, whether or not you are able to meet or provide for your wife's needs. If you became a paraplegic in a car accident, you have not lost one iota of your value as a person. Similarly, suppose, horrible example, but suppose Cameron's in a terrible car accident, the car explodes and she's charred, right? She has lost all physical attractiveness. She's scarred all over. She has not lost one iota of her value and dignity as a person.
Yeah, but in an atheistic world, she's lost almost all of it.
Yeah, I'm done with you.
Yeah.
I can't, you're no longer attractive to me. I'm not going to, if that's our approach, it demonstrates what JP2 calls the utilitarian attitude.
All right.
So let's move on here to love as desire.
Being one sex or the other is experienced as a lack, and the opposite sex is normally recognized as the completion of that lack. And Wojtyła says...
Actually, this is from the Catechism.
Oh, thanks.
Yep.
Love causes a desire for the absent good and the hope of obtaining it. This movement finds completion in the pleasure and joy of the good possessed.
So I think that from the Catechism, I included that because it's such a insightful window into the dynamic of desire. When I desire something, I'm recognizing that's good.
I want it.
And I want it.
Yeah.
Because I lack it.
Yeah.
And JP2, again, he's so balanced here. He's saying there's a danger of selfishness here, but not necessarily so, right? Desire itself is the beginning of love. I see something beautiful in you that I lack, and I want to have it. I want to be filled in my empty places with what you have that I don't have. And so we encounter in love the mystery of otherness. And although JP2 doesn't bring up the conversation so much in this context, we can recognize here right away a problem with homosexuality.
That's exactly what I was thinking about. Yeah. If he's right here, that love is the desiring of something I do not have and wish to have, if that's correct, then it would follow that the homosexual man is looking for what he believes he lacks in his masculinity.
Exactly.
And then you think of all of the kind of gay stereotypes and why that might be the case.
And this is a gross oversimplification, but there's an important truth here. I think part of the journey for the man who has same-sex attraction is to recognize, wait, I already am what I'm looking for in this other. To recognize I am a man. The mystery of otherness is not going to be found in this male, because I am a male. The mystery of otherness is going to be found in the other sex. Not the place to get into a full-on conversation about that, but I think we're just hinting at a problem. Yeah. When we erase the mystery of otherness between the sexes, there's a theological implication, and it's this. The male-female difference is an analogy written into the created order of the otherness of the creature and the creator.
Yeah.
Right? What does Paul say? He says the one flesh union of husband and wife is a great mystery that refers to Christ and the church, God and the creature. Right? What is Christianity? In its very essence, Christ himself is the marriage of the creator and the creature. In one person, we have the mystery of creator and creature wed in the one person of Christ, right? Male on male or female on female, you no longer have the mystery of otherness that allows a holy, life-giving communion. We'll say more about that later, but I just want to give a preview of where this goes.
And I also want to say, for those lovely men and women who do have same-sex attraction, we'll put 2 links in the description below. I've done 2 interviews, one with a woman, one with a man. Both were excellent, and they shared very honestly and vulnerably and beautifully about their journey in this area.
And I think I'll just say this also. All of us, you, me, everyone, as a result of original sin, we are sexually disoriented. All of us. We are called by the gospel itself to a reorientation of our humanity towards the divine. This is the gift and calling of human sexuality. For every single human being.
Yeah. A
reorientation. One of my beloved professors and mentors, the late Monsignor Lorenzo Albacete, he used to say, there's a lot of talk about sexual orientation in the world today, but the ultimate sexual orientation is the orientation of the creature towards the creator. Mm-hmm. That's the ultimate purpose of human sexuality here. This will come out actually in a few episodes later. So we're getting ahead of ourselves, but
Yeah, let's look at the quote from Love and Responsibility. Love as desire is felt as a longing for some good. I want you because you are a good for me. Genuine love, however, is marked by a longing for the actual person and not merely by a sensual desire seeking some outlet. The person who satisfies one's desire is, in one sense, useful. But to be useful is not the same as being an object for use.
yeah, well, let's talk about that in a moment. That's really important.
Thus, genuine love as desire never becomes utilitarian in its attitude. So this distinction between making use of and using is important.
Let's just look at his words. His words are chosen very carefully.
Okay.
To be useful is not the same as being an object for use, right? You were just talking about how you find Cameron very attractive, more attractive today than when you married her, right?
Yep.
That attractiveness feeds a lack in you, right? You want to take that into yourself, right? What are lovers saying in a passionate kiss? Why is the mouth such an integral part of the love of a husband and a wife, right? Well, what's the purpose of the mouth?
I want to eat you.
I want to eat you.
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
And why do we want to eat? To live, to be, I lack.
Yeah.
My stomach is empty. I need to be filled to live.
Yes.
Right? If we can't see the connection here between this and Christianity itself, the consummate moment, the consummate act of Christianity is eat my flesh, drink my blood, right? We are hungry for God. We are hungry for life. I want to take in. So in this sense, Cameron is very useful to you. There's a hunger you feel. In her beauty you lack and you want to take it in.
Also her motherhood. Like I have to make use of her in order to have children.
Yes, but that's not the same as treating her as an object of use.
Yeah.
And the distinction is one honors the dignity of her as a person.
Yeah.
The other, you're treating her merely as a thing.
Or to put it a different way, if I ever subordinate the good of you to the good of pleasure, then I've got the hierarchy out of order.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. If my goal is the pleasure I get from you, now you're an instrumental good.
Yeah.
If my goal is to honor your goodness, to which I am beautifully and deeply attracted, I want to honor that. Now you are truly bestowing on the person, not bestowing so much, but you are recognizing the dignity that God has bestowed on that person and you're honoring it. There's a big difference there. Sometimes you might say, okay, where's the line? And JP2 is, I think, very frank and real when he says, there's a line here that's sometimes blurry. When am I using? When am I making use of?
Yeah.
There's a fine line there.
You know, to not to go back to this too much, but in my back and forth with Shapiro, it felt like that was what we couldn't nail down. It's like, well, how do you even know?
Right.
But just because you don't know where the line is, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Because you can think of that with any other sin.
Right.
Like, I've been greedy before. I've been vengeful before. I've been irrationally angry and all these sorts of things. Do I know exactly when that happens? Like, can I go, oh, that's
Right.
And it's like, well, maybe not. But part of becoming more morally mature is to become more aware of your inner life and to detect the movements of your heart.
Well said.
And if you can say, well, there's obviously a difference between being generous and greedy. Well, just because you don't know where that line is, it doesn't mean greedy doesn't exist.
Right.
Nor does it mean that lust in marriage isn't possible.
Correct. And I think one of the key distinctions here is this idea of where he says in the second line of quote number 2, where you're desiring just merely some outlet in which to indulge your will for pleasure, right? If your wife or your husband is merely an outlet for your pleasure seeking,
Yeah.
your spouse is going to feel used rather than loved.
Yep.
And I think I brought this up in another episode you and I filmed. But the example is this. I'll say to my audience, a room full of men and women, I'll say, ladies, how many of you want to be married to a man who cannot say no to his sexual desires? never has a hand gone up, because she intuits if he can't say no, his yes doesn't mean anything, and I'm just an outlet for an uncontrollable desire. So where does this lead? It leads to the need, and we'll say more about this in a future episode. It leads to the need for self-mastery of my desires so that I can learn how to put my desires at the service of the dignity of the person.
I think this is why it's important to interpret St. Paul's words about marriage as not a relief of concupiscence, but a remedy.
Remedy. Yeah. Very, very important. When Paul talks about, better to marry than to be aflame with passion, right? Many have interpreted that as, once you get married, you can just release your passions on your spouse. Well, not without a deep willingness to allow your passions to be, this would be JP2's word, sublimated. Now, what does that mean? Made sublime, lifted up, ordered towards the goodness and dignity of the person. And here, experience backs up what JP2 says, merely relying on instinct will get us nowhere. If I merely rely on instinct, I'm going to treat my spouse, who is a person, and because my spouse is a person, she should never be used as a means to an end. If I'm only relying on instinct here, I will treat my wife as a means to an end, and she will feel not loved, but used. We are called to so much more, right? Love and responsibility calls us to the responsibility in all circumstances of honoring the dignity of the person.
Yeah.
So we mature here from love as desire, not that love as desire is in itself a problem, but it's the beginning of love.
Okay.
We have to mature to what JP2 calls love as goodwill or benevolence. Let's take a look at that.
Without benevolence, we have not love, but egoism or false love. Love as goodwill brings us as close to the pure essence of love as it is possible to get, but it is a challenge. And so we'll jump into JP2 here, who says, goodwill is the same as selflessness in love. Not, I long for you as a good, but I long for your good.
Let's pause there. So you can add here from St. Thomas Aquinas' definition of love, to will the good of the other, right? So love as goodwill, almost always love begins with love as desire. I see you have something I lack, I'm attracted to it, I want it.
Yeah.
If we don't allow benevolence to come into that love as desire, we will stop at, I long for you as a good for me. Nothing wrong with that, but it has to become, not only do I long for you as a good for me, but I long for your good. The danger of stopping at, I long for you as a good for me, is that I end up treating you as an instrument for my own good.
And not just, and to take it one step further, not just I long for your good, but I long for your good for your sake.
For your sake.
Yeah.
And I am willing to sacrifice myself to uphold your good.
Right. Because it's possible to want someone's good for your sake.
Yes.
I think I mentioned this in a previous episode about I want you to work out so you can have a better body in my estimation, and that will allow me to lust over you. You see what I mean?
Yes. And that's what JP2 means when he says, without benevolence, we have not love, but we have egoism.
Yeah.
Right? I want you to be more attractive.
For me. Yeah.
Right? We need a maturing of love here. And this is, we shouldn't, when we recognize our need for maturing here, we shouldn't be beating ourselves up. This is the pilgrimage for every human person. No one is born as a perfect lover. We have all kinds of inner battles we all must fight to learn how to become more and more
helpful to hear. Yeah.
A lover.
Yeah.
Right? And we're not unlovable because we don't yet know how to love. Right? I have had this idea that I'm only going to be lovable when I reach some imagined perfection. right? That's perfectionism, which is very different than the road to perfection, right? Along the road to perfection, I recognize my imperfections, but I don't shrink thinking this makes me unlovable. God loves me right here in my imperfection, and the knowledge of that love in my imperfection is what brings me along the road.
That's such a beautiful thing to say, and I need to hear that, and I'm sure others do as well, because there's times in my marriage where I acted so immaturely and lustfully, and
you and me both.
And I just think I'm so ashamed of that, and I also see how my wife loved me in that and continued to love me, and I wonder why. Yeah,
that's love right there. That's the real deal. And unlove is only healed by love, right? The only way we can mature in love is through the experience of genuine love, which means, because human beings are broken, you gave a beautiful example of Cameron loving you well, but the only way she was able to love you well is because she had received well the love of the Lord in her life. Mm-hmm. You cannot give what you do not have here. If we look merely inward at our own resources, we don't have in and of ourselves the ability to love this way. The only way we can love this way is by opening those wounded, vulnerable places to the infilling of a love that does not originate in us. And in my knowledge that I am loved in all of my crap, in all of my brokenness, as I know I am loved there, now that love can spill out more to others in their brokenness. That's the pilgrimage JP2 is inviting us on here in Love and Responsibility. It's a tender journey because that openness makes us very vulnerable.
I'm just thinking how insane it would be if, let's say we were going on a pilgrimage to a particular church and you're all as a group and you're all getting ready to undertake this pilgrimage, but someone in the group is pretending he's already there. No, I don't. You're like, okay, dude, you're not there. That's why we're doing this thing.
Yeah.
The point is this thing. And too often maybe we think that in order to be lovable, I have to pretend I'm holy. I have to pretend I have everything together, as opposed to joining everybody else in the pilgrimage we're all called on.
Well said.
And that comes from a place of hurt and fear and the fear of being unlovable.
Yes,
so again,
yes.
even that's not to shame ourselves, as you pointed out so rightly.
Yeah. I've worn a lot of masks in my life because I've been afraid that behind the mask, I'm not lovable. And the Catechism says it so well. Entering into relationship with the Lord, what the Catechism calls prayer, right? Entering into this love relationship with the Lord, this is a direct quote from the Catechism, is where we let our masks fall so that we can allow the Lord to love us as we are. And in allowing the Lord to love us as we are, behind the masks, behind, to use the biblical expression, behind the fig leaves, right? To allow the Lord to love us as we are, we become an offering to be purified. What does that mean? Where we, as we were saying earlier, our desires become rightly oriented. The more we let the love in, the more the love is going to come out. And our very effective and sensual reactions, remember affectivity means our affections, and our sensual desires, affectivity, sensuality, they become oriented more and more towards authentic self-giving, the more I'm letting that love in to exactly those places where I have been disoriented, where I have wounded myself and wounded others. This is love as benevolence. And I can share an example here to bring this home. I'll never forget, Matt, the moment I realized I am never letting this woman out of my life. This is going to be my wife. I knew it. Little backstory. Wendy and I met in our college years. I was a few years ahead of her in school, but we were part of this Catholic fellowship group that met on Friday nights. And for 3 years, we were part of this group. Wendy was hoping and praying one day I would be her husband. I had no idea, clueless, because I was actually interested in some other girl that was part of this group. But her dad didn't want me to date her. And Wendy, being very observant, had noticed that this other girl, Laura, and I had feelings for each other, but for some reason we weren't a couple.
Mm-hmm.
And Wendy and I are starting to become more and more romantically involved, and yet I was still really stinging, like it was an oucher from this relationship with Laura. And Wendy said to me, tell me more about this whole thing with Laura. Like, I observed it from afar for a time, but what was that thing? What was going on there? And I was like, I don't want to tell my wife, or not my wife, I don't want to tell my girlfriend this story.
Yeah.
Because she's going to get all jealous. Because the very same 3 years that she was hoping and praying I'd be her husband, I was interested in this other person.
Yeah.
She said, no, please tell me. I've wondered what that was. So I told her the story reluctantly. And sure enough, we're on the phone, and I heard kind of sniffles on the other end. I was like, oh, crap. I knew it. She's all jealous. And she says, I'm so sorry you went through so much pain. I was like, excuse me? And I realized her tears were not jealousy. They were pain for me. And then she told me, you know, during that same time period, I knew there was something. I knew you and Laura had feelings for each other, but I knew there was some other extra force, extraneous force that was not allowing you to be together. And she said, so I started praying for the two of you, whatever that might be that was keeping you apart, that you would come together. I said, excuse me? I was like, what? You were, at the very same time, you were hoping and praying we would get together. You were actually praying that I would be together with Laura? I couldn't believe my ears. And she said, well, isn't that what the gospel calls us to do? To pray for the good of the other?
You're like, yeah. I get it, Wendy. You're very holy.
Yeah, that's what I was like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, yes, but does that really happen?
That's beautiful.
And I realized I had never experienced such, to use JP2's word, benevolence.
Yeah. So benevolence in a word would be just that
to
loving
will
of the good of the other,
even if it costs you.
Yeah.
And that's what Wendy was showing.
Yeah.
To put your own desire to the side, to honor the desire of the other, to uphold the good of the other. Mm-hmm. That's benevolence and love. And it gets us to the purest essence of what love really is. But here, JP2 says, love cannot be really love unless there's a reciprocity.
Okay.
Right? So let's talk about what he calls the problem of reciprocity.
Yeah, genuine reciprocity is based on mutually desiring an honorable good. When it's based on mutual egoism, each becomes an object to be loved only as long as he or she remains useful.
Yeah, and there, we skipped a line above that I want to get to because it's very important to recognize our limitations here.
Yeah.
Right? There is a certain amount of self-interest in love, he says. Can you read that last line in quote number 3?
Yeah,
that'll shine a light on...
At the same time, a certain level of self-interest is present in human love without detracting from its proper character. Each person is a limited good and thus capable of disinterestedness only within limits. Love is at once disinterested and rewarded.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That's very, very important. Because...
Yeah, now I'm trying to think, like, so then what would a disordered way of loving look like in that regard? Would it be, I wish to love my wife for her sake, and I am completely uninterested in any reward?
Yes. To say, it's really to make the person into God, to think a limited creature could be totally without any interest in what I get out of this relationship. Now, there's a lot to balance out here because Christ does call us, this is the gospel call, love one another as I have loved you. Right? And that is a call to a divine love that is beautifully and even totally disinterested. So I don't want to discount that we are to strive for that. But it's a realistic, JP2 is being very realistic here in recognizing you are not God, right? You are a limited being. And so loving as God loves has certain limitations for the creature. The creature can only go so far in loving as God loves because in the end, what are you not?
God.
God, right? And God has no needs. But you and I,
Turns out,
we have needs, right?
Yeah.
Put it this way. It's impossible for the creature, by nature of being a creature, not to have needs, right? And we are right to hope that at some level, that need or those needs will be met in an authentic relationship of love. That's what he's recognizing here, right? God has no needs. So he can love in a totally disinterested way. The creature, by nature of being a creature, has needs.
What's maybe an example you've encountered in your many years of speaking on this topic where you've encountered either a man or a woman who you think was trying to love like that, as if they had no needs?
As if they had no needs.
Maybe they thought they were doing the right thing, but you were like, no.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. A student came to me some years ago and told me this story, and I have her permission to share it. She was in counseling, and she was really, really struggling to love someone in her life. And the counselor's advice was, you just need to try harder. You just need to love more. You just need to da-da-da-da-da. What the counselor was not recognizing, this was a Catholic counselor, and my counsel to this person was, you need to be loved more first in order to love more. You are a creature in need of love. The only way the creature can learn to love divinely is to be honest in the very first place about my need to be loved.
We love because he loved us first. Yeah.
Boom. There's the scripture that backs up everything we're trying to say. And in fact, we'll bring this up in our concluding episode, that the only way we can love is because he has first loved us. If we think that we are to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps to accomplish loving, we are forgetting that we are creatures in need. Right? So this idea, you just need to love more, you just need to try harder, you just need to be good, you just need to do the right thing, you're not trying hard enough. That is a failure to recognize the inherent limitation of being a creature. JP2 acknowledges this in his discussion here. And this leads rightly into a proper understanding of reciprocity. Reciprocity in love means a relationship cannot be established unless two people are coming to each other with their need for love, and they are reciprocating it. But reciprocity is only genuine if what we are desiring is not just a kind of feedback loop between us, right? I love you, you love me. It's like it becomes a navel gazing, which quickly becomes egotistical. But reciprocity is only genuine in as much as there is a good outside of the relationship, a genuine good that they are both looking to together, and realize that in our love for each other, we can accomplish this other good. Well, in the normal and natural course of things, the other good to which both orient themselves would be to become one flesh. For what purpose? The child, right? The family, the fact that the male and female coming together naturally bears fruit, becomes the good, the genuine good, that allows reciprocity between male and female not to be mere egoism, but it orients the need for love also towards a self-giving that goes beyond just the feedback loop here and takes us out of ourselves. Fertility, in the natural order of things, is ecstatic, meaning ecstasy, to go out of yourself, right? So to render the sexual act sterile is to turn it in on itself, and you are, in this sense, de-ecstasizing it. You are pulling it in, and you lose the authentic reciprocity. So maybe you can read again what JP2 says here.
Well, just under the reciprocity.
Yeah.
It is impossible to put your trust in another person knowing that his or her sole aim is utility or pleasure. The moment pleasure comes to an end, the real reason for that person's love, quote unquote, also ends, and the illusion of reciprocity bursts like a bubble. Genuine reciprocity cannot arise from two egoisms.
Yeah, so when you are dealing with a reciprocity of egoism, for example, we just mutually agree to use each other. You cannot base a relationship on this because you know he or she is only going to stick around
As long as I'm useful.
as long as I'm useful.
What a terrible feeling.
Utterly gut-wrenching.
Which would lead to hatred,
Yes.
resentment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he
Just
says.
have a look around. Yeah.
Love of egoism a love based on egoism quickly becomes hatred of the other. And yeah, you just look at countless examples of this
Yeah.
in our world.
Resentment. It's almost
Yes.
like even worse than hatred. It's
Yeah.
this resentment. I don't know how that's worse than hatred.
It's hatred. Maybe you can hate from a distance, but resentment is personal. Like
Yeah.
you son of a biscuit.
Yeah.
You know, you have hurt me so badly.
Yeah.
And it's a rightful recognition of having been wounded because you have been treated as a means to an end. And as soon as I'm no longer useful to you, you will dispose of me and go find somebody else to use, which demonstrates, as he says here, this reciprocity, such reciprocity is an illusion and bursts
Like a bubble.
like a bubble. How does this crazy celibate man know all this stuff? He knows all this stuff because he's a student of humanity.
Yeah. I forget who it was who said, you don't need to be a dog to be a veterinarian.
Right.
You know, yeah.
Right.
You can
Yeah.
study animals and understand them.
And he knows this stuff also because he has battled it in his own heart. He's not writing this from a distance.
Shocked at the selfishness of others.
No.
Right.
He's writing this from his own experience of learning what it means to love another human being. And we'll talk later about celibacy for the kingdom and how the same inner redemption that we're talking about, the same reorientation of desire is required for a celibate to live a fruitful celibacy. Okay, now we can go to the psychological analysis of love. All of that we've talked about was still under the heading of the metaphysical analysis of love, but now we're going to talk about the psychological analysis of love.
Should we go straight to these two quotes, 5 and 6?
Let's talk about sensuality and affectivity.
Okay.
So we're talking here about physical and emotional attractions.
Yep.
Sensual, the physical, affectivity, the emotional. I just want to say before we read these quotes, remember we're the goal here is integration, never dissection and diversion or putting aside. JP2 wants to look at sensual and affective attraction, and he wants to say this needs to be integrated with the dignity of the person. So he calls sensual and affective attractions the raw material of love, but it's not yet the finished form of love. This raw material needs to be built into authentic love. So
sensuality in itself is blind to the person and oriented only toward the sexual value of the body. For this reason, it turns to whatever body appears as an object of enjoyment. This most certainly does not mean that sensual excitability is in itself morally wrong. An exuberant and readily roused sensuality is the stuff from which a rich, if difficult, personal life may be made, but sensual actions must be, there's that word again, sublimated.
I love this. This is one of my favorite quotes in the whole text. An exuberant and readily roused sensuality.
Yeah, I have that.
So do I. I think that's why we get along so well. An exuberant and readily roused sensuality is the stuff from which a very sinful life is this what he says?
No, he doesn't.
From which a rich, if difficult personal life can be made, right? So again, look at this. Look at this reverence for our humanity. Not danger, danger, danger. It's only going to lead you to sin. Be suspicious of all of it. No. Be reverent towards the way you are wired, the way you are made. But the invitation to the pilgrimage of sublimating it, making it sublime, lifting it to the value and dignity of the person. If we don't go on that pilgrimage, sensual excitability will just flit and fleet to wherever I find something to excite it, right? Oh, she's hot. Oh, she's hotter. Well, her boobs aren't as beautiful, and you start comparing.
Yeah.
What a terrible injustice to the human person. The human person is incomparable. There's no other Cameron. There's no other Wendy, right? To compare Wendy to someone else. And I've wounded my wife so terribly because I've been programmed by the culture in which I was raised and my own sinful inclination. I've been programmed to compare. You're not as good as so, you're not as attractive as so-and-so. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. You, like me, Matt, we've both been exposed in our day to a lot of porn. What does that do to the way we're programmed to think of what a woman is supposed to look like? Mm-hmm. I remember when I was a boy, young, like 10, 11, 12, finding these porno mags, and in the back of the porno mag, there would be these, women who would send in pictures from home of them naked. It doesn't have the lighting, it doesn't have the airbrushing that was, the porn of the 80s. And I always remember thinking, you're not nearly as attractive as these other pictures. They were real women without the special lighting, without the special makeup, without the airbrushing, right? I was programmed to compare, right? You don't look like this. This is what the centerfold is what I've been programmed to think that's a quote, beautiful woman. You're just a normal woman. Compare. When you come into marriage with these comparisons, you will inevitably, and women have antenna for feeling this, for knowing this is what's going on in the mind of the husband.
Yeah,
and not that it can't go the other way. I'm just speaking. It can obviously go the other way, but I'm not going to speak into that. That's not my experience. My experience is that of a man, and I know the way my mind was just warped by the culture to think of beauty in a very external way, that where you end up comparing what is incomparable. There is no other Wendy
I think
in the whole world.
Maybe what's even more damaging than putting forth, I remember as maybe a 14, 15-year-old, I bought a naked block mount of Pamela Anderson. Somehow had the gall to bring it home and put it on my wall. Parents weren't thrilled about that. But I think what's even more damaging than that, not so much the perfect woman, but the click-through rate of women. Because even the most beautiful woman,
yes,
even if it's a surgically modified airbrush woman, will bore you.
Yeah.
And so it's the click, next body, next, and that's what no one can do. Even poor old, what's the fella's name? Playboy magazine.
Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, Hugh Hefner was still having sort of Viagra-fueled events towards the end of his life. He still was just a miserable old wretch of a man and couldn't be satisfied even with one beautiful woman.
Yeah, here's this is my own vocabulary, but it's taking concepts from JP2.
Yeah.
We desire always to grow deeper. We desire what I would call a vertical variety. And by variety, I mean new discoveries, right? And if we're not going vertically in seeking those new discoveries, we're going to go horizontally. If you are on the pilgrimage of discovering new depths of the inner mystery of Cameron, in your marriage, you will never be bored with your wife, because there's always more to discover in this vertical dimension.
Yeah.
Because the mystery of your wife's person is inexhaustible.
Yeah.
But if you stop merely at the sensual, that which is physically present to you, and you don't go to what we've called the metaphysical dimension, the deeper than physical dimension, well, you get very bored with her physical characteristics very quickly. And then you will take your need for variety horizontally to this woman, to this, and that's what you're talking about, that click thing. Click, 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 the next one, the next one, the next one. So damaging, because it splinters us, it fractures us, it disintegrates us. Chastity is the virtue that integrates that which is fractured in us. That's pretty much a direct quote out of the Catechism. Those parts of us that have been fractured, chastity is the virtue that brings those parts back together and makes us singular in our focus. And in that singularity, we are penetrating ever more deeply into the inexhaustible mystery of the person. And if you're doing that, what a grand adventure. That's what enables couples in their 80s who have been doing this for 60 whatever years to have such a richness to their love, because they know, yeah, we've been together for 60 years, but there's still more. There's still more to discover.
It reminds me of a story of my bishop from Port Pirie back in the day, Bishop Eugene Hurley. He said he was, a couple came and they were renewing their wedding vows in the sense of doing it before the congregation. And he said, tell me about this woman. And he said, she's a mystery to me. And he wasn't trying to be profound, but he's saying exactly, she's still a mystery to me. Yeah.
That's a man on pilgrimage.
Yeah.
That's a man who sees the true dimension of the
which is
pilgrimage
funny
to which we're
because so
called.
often we'll say to each other as a act of aggression, "Oh, I know you."
Yeah.
Like, I know you. I
You're
know.
right.
Yeah.
That is an
I
act of
understand your intention.
aggression.
Yeah.
To say it that way, I know you,
I know you.
I can
There's
possess
nothing,
you.
And there's also nothing more
there's
to be
nothing more
understood.
to you.
Yeah.
But look at the biblical sense of that word. I know you. Adam knew his wife Eve. That's the sense of mystery, where the more you know of a mystery, the more you know there is to know.
Yeah.
That's the journey of married love. That's a keen insight.
Yeah.
How about quote number 6 here?
It has been commonly held that men are more sensual and women are more affective. Affection often passes for love, but like sensuality, it needs to be integrated with the actual person and his or her true dignity. Left to itself, affectivity may also prove only a consumer phenomenon. This is what I raised earlier, didn't I?
Yeah.
With the whole idea how we can use each other from...
Yes, for more than just the sensual reality. And I think, what do you think, Matt? I'll just throw it out as a question. He says it's commonly held, and I think we all agree it's commonly held, that men are more sensual and women are more on the emotional side or affective side, as he says. Do you think that's true?
I do. I think that we've maybe overplayed that.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I started speaking on chastity-related topics and pornography-related topics, I'm so ashamed and embarrassed to say this now, but I used to say something like, men struggle with porn, women more, and it didn't kind of grant the fact that women struggle with pornography. But I don't want to let that mistake overcorrect me to now say men and women are obviously the same.
Right.
I mean, even if it is the case that women watch visual pornography, and they do, I think it's for different reasons. Yeah. And certainly it's the case that I've never met a man who's read romantic novels.
Yeah.
So there is definitely, I think, this difference. I mean, I'd want to speak to women who look at pornography and have them kind of educate me here. But I think when the man watches pornography, he wishes to place himself as the man in the pornography, if there's a man and a woman, whereas the woman wishes to be the woman. Or that's what women have said to me, and I don't want to speak for them, but I want to be I want to receive the attention or the affection or even the abuse that this woman is receiving.
Yeah, tell me if you think this rings true. I once heard it said that a woman will use love in order to get sex, whereas that's the
other way around.
The other way around. A man will use love in order to get sex, and a woman will use sex in order to feel loved.
Yeah. I think superficially that's right.
Yeah, I think there's some thread of truth to that.
Yeah. And I also think that kind of goes hand in hand with this idea that a man would rather be respected than loved. So even if a man uses love to get sex, he might use love to get sex to feel respected. I wonder if that's the end goal. Because the man, I don't know about you, but I would much rather be respected than loved. But I think
I know what you mean.
But I think they end up being the same thing.
Yeah, press into. I was going to say I think they end up being the same.
I do too. And maybe it's just like looking at a diamond from a different facet. Because I want to be known by my wife. I want her to know me. And I think she does. It's a horrifying thing at first when you realize that your wife knows you more than you do and still loves you. I've often said that one of the greatest gifts of growing in self-knowledge is that no matter how poorly you think of me, it pales in comparison to the truth I already know. Like you can't say anything. I know the depths of my wretchedness. That's one step. But to have my wife love me in that is shocking to me because I almost feel like, am I veiling something from you? Have you not yet seen the worst? She's seen a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah, you can't sleep in the same bed.
But she knows me more than I do. Like I'm about to teach in Austria, hey? And I've never taught university before. And she's like, I know you're going to love this. And I don't know that, but I trust her opinion more than mine because I know she knows me so well. That's a cool thing too.
Yeah.
But respect. What is it? What do I mean by respect? I think I mean, I want to believe you. I want you to think that I'm worth it or worth your love or something like that. Or I want you to admire me. I want you to see me as someone who is good and capable and strong and competent.
I think every man feels that. There's no doubt in my mind that I desire my wife to see me as capable.
Like I would never allow my wife to see me throw up. You know, I don't want her maybe you're different. And I'm not saying this is a man thing, but like when my wife's throwing up, she really would like me, I think, to be by her side, rubbing her back. I want her in a different house. I don't want her to see me at my worst.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
think I'm right to not want that. You know, I think maybe I should be able to accept her loving me in that state.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Wouldn't you prefer that she sees you at your worst and still loves you there?
Yep. So maybe it's an immaturity on my part, but I don't want anywhere near me. Like I hate me throwing up. I even don't really like her seeing me cry.
We're gonna get to that. So we're gonna get to this. JP2 touches on it. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
All right,
but this is all right. We're
I
in
don't
the
like
zone.
being seen as weak. I don't like being seen as weak. But all of this kind of goes back to what you said earlier about the man uses sex or love for sex. So, yeah. I think there's truth to that.
I think there's a truth to it too. And I'm going to press in, and I'm maybe even going to challenge you here, Matt, when we get to it. We're not there yet. But ethical analysis of love.
I also guess I want to just say to the woman watching this who might be offended by that, because like I'll say this, like growing up, I think I had more of an emotional temperament that had to be matured. And there was a temptation to throw out that emotional, because when someone came to me maybe and said that men aren't like that, let's say I revolted against that.
Yeah.
But I think I revolted against that too quickly. I think what the emotional nature that I had, that is that just deep feeling part that was so aware of my own pain and the pain of others, I had this kind of intuition that I didn't see in other men necessarily. That was a good that had to be matured.
Yeah.
So
Did you feel, because you were maybe more in touch with your emotions than the average guy, that made you less masculine? Did you have that concern?
No, I think I just resented the idea that a man should be more stoic and able to bear his burden. I resented it and I tried to dismiss it too quickly, as opposed to actually going, okay, so a man should be like that. How do I then reconcile and mature this beautiful thing in me with that? It's kind of like
when you say with that, what's the that?
With the, yes, you ought to bear your burden and offer your strength for others. So what I'm saying is I think the old stereotypes have a lot to teach us,
right,
and we shouldn't abandon them too quickly. It's like if like my beautiful bride is a very choleric temperament, and will often say, I'm not kind of emotional like other women. I want to be like, don't do that too quickly. You have such a beautiful, vulnerable heart, and the Lord wants to call that forth. So I think we can resent what we believe ourselves not to possess too quickly.
Yes.
So what I'd just say to the woman who's like, well, I'm not emotional, or the man who says, oh, I'm not strong like that. I just like, don't too quickly throw out the old stereotypes because you think you lack something that you ought to possess. Don't despise them. Instead, realize that there's a maturing that needs to take place so that Matt does become a strong man on behalf of his wife, and the wife who's maybe afraid of the emotions does begin to lean into that.
Yeah, I think
it's a big topic, and it would take us hours to
it would
excavate. But
I'll add only this, and then we'll move on. That the truth that is present in those stereotypes also lacked a certain integration or a certain wholeness. So we've gone to the other extreme.
Yep.
We need to see what's the truth over here, what's the truth there in those old stereotypes, and then again the journey of integration. And what we end up with, I believe, is we will discover that both men and women have sensual and affective attractions that need to be rightly integrated. And that's what JP2 is calling us to.
Yeah.
So let's look at the ethical analysis of love.
Where are we? What
We
quote?
are, do you see the heading Ethical Analysis of Love, page 4?
Oh, wow, man. We got a way to go.
We do. This is a long episode.
If the person I love is only an occasion for sensual and affective sensations in oneself, then he or she can and will be replaced by those who offer more enticing sensations. But when love reaches the unrepeatable value of the person, the other is loved not for the pleasure he or she brings, but for his or her own sake. Only the value of the person enables love to last forever.
Yeah, so that's back. We've kind of covered this when I was talking about the redheaded waitress that shows up, right? If my love for Wendy is for Wendy's unrepeatable mystery, and not just for repeatable qualities that Wendy has, our love is solid. It has a foundation, right? If I'm only attracted to certain ways that she excites sensations in me, if that's why I, quote, love her, well, my love is going to drift to whoever excites those sensations. And that's what he's getting at here when he says in quote number 7, love demands that sexual values be integrated with the actual value of the person. And I love this. Again, he's so balanced here.
Yeah.
Here the point is not in the least to bypass the sexual values to which the senses and affections react. The point is rather to bind these values, the sexual values, firmly with the value
that's beautiful.
of the person.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. You see that the call to integration there, right? Affirmation of the value of the person must gain ground among a person's erotic lived experiences through a certain mastery of these experiences.
I can't help but think of an analogy with the Holy Eucharist.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because if you were to see the Eucharist, to somehow bind the reality of the Eucharist to the physical appearance, sometimes a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
But you'd like to say, let's throw out the Eucharist, because it's like, no, it's not about that. It's about the spiritual.
Yes,
it's about my loving
yes.
of Jesus. And
Very good analogy. In fact,
and if you were to stop, and I've heard of churches who've done this, which I believe their Eucharist was invalid, where they'll bake a delicious kind of herb Eucharist kind of thing. Like there's different flavors in it. It's like, no, you're missing the entire point here.
Yeah.
But I suppose if you lack the spiritual view, then all you're left with is the carnal, and who the heck wants to just eat something that tastes like a boring ice cream cone every week? And
Again, what you are recognizing is the difficulty of holding the spiritual and the physical together. And this is the very essence of Christianity. This is the very essence of incarnation. That which is pure spirit, God, has taken flesh, and the two are wed, right? And it's a disintegrated world, as painful as it is. It's easier in some sense to live in a disintegrated world because there's no work to be done. There's no pilgrimage to go on. We just flip-flop from either physicalism to angelism, and we just go back and forth, right? There's a pilgrimage to go on that demands an integration where I must, right, there she comes just a walking down the street singing do-a-diddy-diddy-dum-diddy-do. What do I do when I feel that sensual excitement in the presence of a beautiful woman? I can either repress it, pretend it's all bad, and seek spiritual values. That's disintegrating.
and blame her.
Blame her. It's your beauty's causing me to sin. Or I zoom in on the physical and I suck all the life I can out of it. That's not, both are disintegrated. But I can learn mastery of that desire. And I can, in gratitude, say, Lord, thank you for the beauty of that woman. Lord, I want to go on this pilgrimage. I recognize this twisted desire in me. Take me on the pilgrimage, Lord, that untwists the self-seeking and allow my erotic and affective reactions to be wed to the dignity of the person. We'll say much more about this in the next episode called Chastity and the Person. So I'll hold off that for now. He's kind of saying this is where we need to go.
Yep.
But we'll cover that in the next episode. So let's look at, again, under the ethical analysis of love, choice and responsibility.
I see. Yep. Ready. Marital love means taking on the immense responsibility of continually discovering and upholding the inexhaustible value of another person for a lifetime. This demands spending one's freedom, which love is willing to do because we long for love more than for freedom. Freedom is the means and love is the end.
Love this stuff from JP2 on we desire love more than we desire freedom.
So true.
Freedom is the means, love is the end. Mm-hmm. We live in a culture that values freedom so highly that you never spend it. Right? It's like being a billionaire and never spending your money. Right?
It's like Fulton Sheen who says, you go up to a taxi driver and you say, "Are you free?" And he says, "Yes." And you say, "Hooray for freedom." Yeah, freedom exists for something.
For something.
Yeah.
Freedom exists for the sake of love. And that means we have to spend it. And I'm sure you see this like I see it in younger generations today. They are so afraid of spending their freedom.
I saw that in myself, keeping my options open.
Yeah, keep my options open.
Maybe I should be a priest. Maybe I should be married. Maybe I should be married to this woman instead of that woman.
And that's hoarding freedom. You're hoarding freedom there. Why do we have freedom? Freedom is given to us as the capacity to love. What do we have that the animals don't have? Freedom.
Yeah,
but that has to be spent, and we have to spend it on love. And I love this idea that marital love means taking on the immense responsibility of continually discovering and upholding the inexhaustible value of another person for a lifetime. That's what I was calling that vertical variety, where you discover in a vertical dimension ever more beautiful depths to the mystery of the person. Right? When you spend your freedom to make those discoveries, now you have a relationship that can really last a lifetime. But it's not easy because life is going to put this love to the test. Let's look at quote number 8.
Life will put the greatness of one's love to the test. This happens most severely when sexual values lose their effect. Then only the value of the person remains, and the interior truth of one's love becomes evident. Genuine love for the person will not only survive such a test, but will grow stronger.
And this is the example of the old couple that we were talking about, right? Mm-hmm. As St. Paul says, our outer humanity is going to waste away.
Yeah.
Right? And just look at the whole process of aging.
Yeah.
Right? I have gray hair, I have age spots, I have wrinkles that I didn't used to have. If I think only my outer reality, my physical attractiveness is why Wendy married me, well, aging is a death sentence to that kind of love, right? Which is why people think in order to retain lovability, I have to get all this plastic surgery. I have to keep looking youthful because I'm no longer lovable if I'm old and have eyebrows that go like this and hair growing out of my ears, and which I do. And I actually pluck them because I think they're unattractive.
Me too. I have a wife who plucks them. I'm so glad I'm not single. Sometimes I'll meet a man and he's got eyebrow hairs that are sticking out. Right. And I'm like, does your wife not look at you?
I have similar thoughts, Matt. I have similar thoughts. And maybe that's just, hygiene or personal taste and grooming.
Sure.
But also there's something here to recognize that old man who has eyebrows like this and hair growing out of his ears, he has lost nothing of his value and dignity as a person. And the old woman who also has whiskers on her chin now has lost nothing of her value as a person. And those two people still loving each other, that's what every human being desires. We want to be loved when all of our ugliness is on display. We want to be loved. And this is where I'm going to challenge you about the vomiting thing. Because my best guess is, Matt, there's a fear there that being seen at that most weak, vulnerable place somehow makes you unattractive or unlovable. And I want to say, no, that's where you're most loved. in your most vulnerable, in what you consider most unattractive about you, hurling into a toilet. To love as God loves is to see all and not be afraid of any of it. I see all and I love you. I love you. I love all of you. And JP2 gets to that. Look at quote number 9. Look at what he says.
The love for a person, which results from a valid act of choice, is concentrated on the value of the person as such and makes us feel emotional love for the person as he or she really is, not for the person of our imagination. The strength of such a love emerges most clearly when the beloved person stumbles.
Or when the beloved person vomits.
Yeah, when his or her weakness or even sins come into the open. One who truly loves does not then withdraw his love, but loves all the more. Love is full consciousness.
Loves in full consciousness.
Loves in full consciousness of the other's shortcomings and faults, for the person as such never loses its essential value.
Yeah, so how does that strike you? In this example of you not wanting your wife to see you in your most vulnerable, vomiting state.
Yeah, I don't think I'm thinking too deep enough about it yet. I know you're right. I think I'm gratified that my wife would be willing to and does at times. You know, it's not like she's like, oh gosh, shut the door. That would actually cut me if she ever said that. I'd be very hurt by that.
That's what I'm getting at there. Because I know, I was saying earlier, I've worn a lot of masks in my life.
Yeah.
And anybody can put on a pretty face to try to impress. And if you're good at it, if you're trained at it like I've been, you can do a pretty good job of making yourself look pretty good. But what has haunted me my whole life, the question that's way down in there is, am I loved when all my masks are off?
Yeah. I think like a similar thing would be the times in my marriage maybe where I've gained some weight around the belly and I've been like ashamed of that, and seeing that like she actually could not care less about that, that's nice.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I want to remain in that state. Like
Sure.
I want to be strong, and I want my wife to believe me to be strong. But if she were to be disgusted by my body, that would cut. There's a similar kind of analogy there.
Yeah, and there is.
And I'm sure this obsession, not that I don't think I have this obsession, but this obsession to remain in shape and at my peak, that sort of thing, I think really is just this way of fending off the horror of aging.
Yeah, which itself is fending off the horror of death.
Yeah.
I mean, aging is the reminder that we're all headed to the grave.
Yeah.
And I think the ultimate question is there a way to conquer death? The lovers in the Song of Songs cry out for a love that is stronger than death. Christianity, if the resurrection is real, then there is an answer to that cry of the heart. And if there is an answer to that cry, then we don't need to be afraid of aging and death. I see this both in me and my wife, right? My wife is 50 right now, 51. I'm 54. And we don't look like we used to look when we got married in 1995. And I see some certain insecurities in my wife, and I see certain insecurities in me. Those insecurities can only be assuaged by a love that goes deeper than aging and death. And that means Christ has to come into this place. Or my wife is going to think the only way I can remain lovable is by dyeing my hair, getting a facelift, and maintaining my figure. But the value of the person never changes, even when our weaknesses and sinfulness are on display. That's what we're after here. That's what we desire.
It is.
And this requires, and we'll close here, this requires a deep education in love.
Yeah, we need a genuine education in love because we are prone to confuse the raw material of love with its finished form. When we do so, the moral demands of love foster resentment. And then JP2 says, love is never ready-made. It never is, but is always only becoming. What it becomes depends upon the contribution of both persons and the depth of their commitment. There is no need to be dismayed if love sometimes follows tortuous ways.
Well, actually, look at the word there. It's not torturous, but tortuous.
What's that word mean?
It means twisted, contorted.
Oh, I'd never seen that word before.
Yeah,
tortuous.
Tortuous.
That's awesome.
It does follow tortured ways too, but
That's what I was like, oh God, he knows me.
twisted,
Tortuous, I see.
tortuuous ways. Yeah.
Let's say that again. There is no need to be dismayed if love sometimes follows tortuous ways. Cool. Learn something every day. Grace has the power to make straight the path of human love.
Yeah, so that sentence only makes sense to make straight if you look at that word tortuous, right? This is so hopeful.
So in JP2's words, it would be more accurate to say to my wife, I'm learning to love you, than to say I love you.
Correct. Yeah. Love never is, but is always only just becoming. Yes. Wendy, I'm learning to love you more. Mm-hmm. That's truthful. And it reminds me of the old song, I love you more today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow. Right? That's a recognition of this pilgrimage of love. It's a beautiful pilgrimage to go on, and it's worthy of the human heart. Mm-hmm. It takes proper stock of what we long for, what we're made for, and it says, with God's grace, we can live this. That's the journey of love and responsibility. That's the pilgrimage.